Well, good evening, everybody. We're starting to stream now to YouTube and I believe to Facebook also. So we're just going to give everyone 1 or 2 minutes just to sign up and get on board, and then I'll introduce our speaker and the meeting. Thank you. Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's meeting. My name's Rob Miller. I'm the director of the Cuba Solidarity Campaign here in the UK, and I'm going to be hosting tonight's meeting. This is the third and the final meeting in our series of 3 meetings on breaking the blockade. And these have all been organised in conjunction with the timing of the United Nations vote at the United Nations, which took place last week. And that was the vote, of course, on Cuba's resolution to end the blockade. And tonight we're really delighted and honoured to welcome our special guest, Ana Silvia Rodríguez Abascal, who is the ambassador and the deputy permanent representative of Cuba to the United Nations, who we're really pleased is joining us here tonight live from New York, from the UN delegation in New York. We're very grateful that Anna's able to join us. She's been incredibly busy, I know, over the last few weeks. And even today, I'm sure, extremely busy. It's 1:30 in the afternoon in New York now. Anna has another meeting in about an hour's time. So we are going to keep this meeting just to 1 hour today. I'd like to welcome all of you who have joined us tonight on this Zoom call, and also all of you who are joining us on YouTube tonight. If you are watching on YouTube, please do remember to click the like button on YouTube and the subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this, because this will help spread the word about this meeting, but also about our solidarity work with Cuba. And although not a formal panelist, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence and welcome Her Excellency Barbara Montalvo Alvarez, the Cuban ambassador here in London, to our meeting this evening. So just regarding the format for tonight, I'm going to be asking Anna a number of questions that we've been sent by all of you in advance. And if there's time at the end, we can also ask some questions from tonight's meeting if they're posted in the chat as we go through. And we're going to finish by 7:30 UK time. So firstly, I'd like to thank Anna for joining us here. We're incredibly honoured that you found time to be with us. I also know you're finishing your term in the United States soon, and you'll be heading back to Cuba and completing your work there. So thank you, Anna, for joining us. Our first question, if you don't mind. Last week was, I understand, a successful outcome for Cuba, but can you tell us just a little bit of your early thoughts about the vote last week? Who made significant contributions? And did the vote go as well as you were expecting?
Thank you, Rob. First of all, let me thank you for this opportunity, and also to thank all those who are joining us for this exchange and this conversation between friends. Last week the vote goes as we expecting. This year, once more, the international community raised its voice and showed its overwhelming support for the end of the U.S. government blockade against Cuba. 184 member states voted in favor of our resolution, signaling their continued call on the U.S. government to put an end to this illegal and cruel policy. Furthermore, over 45 member states representing all regions of the globe made a statement that clearly outline their concern over how the blockade affects the Cuban people and its right to development, including the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Among them, there were delegations that spoke on behalf of group of countries, for example, like Azerbaijan that spoke on behalf of the non-aligned movement, a movement that comprised 120 member states, Guinea on behalf of the G77 and China with a membership of 134 countries, Haiti on behalf of CARICOM, Singapore on behalf of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, known as ASEAN, Eritrea on behalf of the African Group, and Niger on behalf of the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation. In all those statements, they also denounce the extraterritorial impact of this policy and that the territorial impact of this policy, and that also they recognize that the blockade is not a bilateral issue between Cuba and the United States, because not only affect Cuba, but also violate the sovereign right of each country to establish commercial relations with whatsoever it wishes. And something also that the vote revealed was the isolation of the United States. Not even their closest political allies accompanying them. So in short, let me tell you that we are very grateful to have received once again a resounding no of the international community to the blockade imposed to Cuba by the US government.
Brilliant. I mean, having 184 countries voting with you is quite an achievement. And I understand only 2 countries voted against the resolution, which was the United States itself and Israel, I
Yes.
Okay. Well, in addition to your report, because Cuba gives a report alongside its resolution to the United Nations, alongside that report on the blockade in 2019, you also submitted an additional addendum, presumably because the UN was delayed this year. And the addendum covered the period from April 2020 to December 2020. Mm-hmm. Can you summarize some of the main points that were contained in that addendum report this year?
Yes, Rob, let me tell you that usually the report of the Secretary General is published weeks before of the presentation of the Cuban resolution. Due to the COVID-19 restriction at UN, we decided not to present the resolution in October, November 2020 as usual. So the addendum served the purpose of bringing up-to-date information on what happened since the cutoff of the Secretary General report. In particular, the addendum put some emphasis over the course of the Trump administration last year in office. There are several examples in the addendum on how the blockade is affecting us, particularly, as I mentioned, amidst the coronavirus pandemic. To summarize, during the period, the U.S. government tightened the blockade in, let's say, in an opportunistic and unparalleled way amid the difficulties conditions triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Over 240 measures implemented during Donald Trump's administration, with more than 50 of them adopted in 2020 alone, illustrate the particular viciousness of these policies against Cuba people and our government. And all these measures, let me tell you that all these measures implemented during Trump administration remain today in effect. And all these actions magnify the manifold challenges imposed by COVID-19 pandemic, and also multiply its devastating socioeconomic, health-related, and financial impact. They have repeatedly hampered, for example, the arrival of humanitarian aid in the country, which in the context of addressing the pandemic is immoral and unjustifiable, and highlights also the blockade's criminal nature. Only between April and December 2020, a period of 9 months, the blockade cost Cuba over $3.5 billion in losses, only in a 9-month period. And when we added to the losses of the previous year, the total from April 2019 to December 2020 amount to more than $9.1 billion in losses. And let me put an example on how insidious the blockade can be. And this example is one you might be well acquainted with. And it happened in February of this year when the companies, British companies, just Giving and crowdfunded UK blocked the pages of the solidarity organization Cubans in UK that was created to raise funds for the purchase of medical supplies and to support the COVID-19 vaccination campaign in Cuba. And on top of all these new measures, in January 2021, just a few days before Trump administration finished his term, Cuba was included in the unilateral list of state sponsor of terrorism. That was widely rejected within and even beyond the United States. But this inclusion and this action reinforce the consequences of the blockade by making for us more difficult to engage in international trade, carry out financial operation, and acquire basic supplies. Dozens of banks have suspended their operation with Cuba, and I'm talking about legitimate transfer for the purchase, for example, of food, medication, and consumer goods. So in the midst of all these difficulties caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, dozens of Cuban diplomatic missions around the world have had their tight cuts with the bank that traditionally provide them with service for fear of reprisal from the US government. So roughly, this is the new information that the Addendum present to the member states of the organization.
Well, thank you very much. And I know the last months of the Trump administration and obviously the 6 months of the Biden administration have been an incredibly difficult period for Cuba, economically speaking, on top of obviously the COVID crisis. And for those viewers who are interested, we're posting the full report that Cuba presented to the United Nations, as well as the addendum right now in the chat box. And it's all available on the Cuba Solidarity Campaign website. And it is really horrific reading when you see the long list of effects of the extraterritorial nature of the blockade in particular, affecting companies and individuals in every corner of the globe. And you're right, Anna, that Just Giving have blocked a number of organizations, including the UK charity, the registered charity, the Music Fund for Cuba, from using its services, which is a real indictment, really, of not only the blockade, but the failure of our government to be able to protect British organizations, companies, and in this case, a registered charity, from doing very perfectly legal work in this country. Moving on and just to say, everybody, we have nearly 100 people now watching on YouTube and Zoom. So we welcome all of you from all across the globe. There are people from the United States, from Wales, Scotland, and so on. And it's really wonderful to see you all with us tonight. Anna, can I ask you specifically about Cuba's response to the speech of the United States representative at the United Nations? Was this as you would expect, or was it normal? And now, do you see any hope, perhaps in their words, of any change in their position going forward?
Well, let me tell you that the speech was something expected, but we felt that it was necessary to respond to the statement made by the U.S. representatives, since it was riddled with lies and misrepresentation of reality. First of all, it is still amazing that the U.S. government finds the moral authority to pass judgment on other nations. when their own records in so many areas, including the protection of human rights, is poor and even questionable. All of us see the killing of George Floyd by police hands, and Breonna Taylor. All of us have seen those pictures of children in cages, migrant children in cages. So they don't have any moral authority to give lecture to any country. So in addition to that, we cannot allow them for any form of justification of this blockade also to go unanswered. The blockade has no justification and period. So we cannot allow them to justify the blockade against Cuba that is qualified as a genocide. Another deception is that the U.S. pretends to present itself as our commercial partner, or that it ensures the shipping of humanitarian aid and medicines to Cuba. And precisely, it is the U.S. government's blockade that obstructs the official channel for sending this type of aid, even from third countries and in the midst of the pandemic. Maybe you read in the news a shipment of ventilators and other supply for the COVID-19 pandemic that the Alibaba CEO tried to send to Cuba and couldn't arrive to Cuba because of the blockade. So, as our former president Raúl Castro has said, and the president Díaz-Canel as well, Cuba has always been willing, we have been willing to engage in a bilateral dialogue with the government of the United States, but in a context of absolute respect for our independence, self-determination, and sovereignty, and based on absolute equality and respect. So on the question if we see any hope of a change in the position of the US government, well, let me tell you that the Democratic Party electoral platform promised voters to swiftly reverse the action taken by Trump's administration, particularly the elimination of the restriction to travel to Cuba, financial remittances, and the implementation of the bilateral migration accords, including the granting of visa. However, this promise has yet to materialize. Just today I read that they are still studying the policies towards Cuba. So what is happening now that all the measures implemented by Trump administration that were have a very severe impact in the Cuban population are still in place. And it is well established fact that the large majority of the US citizens support the lifting of the blockades and the freedom to travel to Cuba, and that the Cuban living here in the United States want normal relation and well-being for their family. And even without the US government, there are many who have claimed, some of them may be following a pragmatic approach, that the blockade should be ended because it is an anachronistic and ineffective policy that has not achieved nor will ever achieve its goal, and has ended up by let's say discrediting and isolating the United States itself. So we hope that sooner than later the new administration will reverse these cruel measures adopted by the Trump administration, as well as seek to put an end to the blockade.
Thank you, Ana. And of course, we at the Cuba Solidarity Campaign are doing everything we can to join that campaign or pressure on the United States administration and President Biden to actually fulfill some of his promises that he made at the time of the election to change and to review the Cuba policy. We received today, and we posted it online, a letter from the US ambassador here in London, Yael Lempert, who responded to a letter from a British Member of Parliament, Graham Morris, who is the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Cuba. And he wrote alongside 58 members of Parliament who had signed an early day motion on ending the blockade and changing US policy. And Yael Lempert, again, repeated really much of the same statements that we've heard from the Biden administration, from Blinken and so on. about reviewing decisions, including the decision to designate Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism, recognizing the challenges that Cuba faces as they deal with the pandemic, and so on and so forth. But it's time really for the US to move beyond these glib words of reviews and so on. And it really is now a humanitarian question, particularly for the Cubans on the island and the Cuban Americans who really want to re-establish contact and those points of contact, the bridges of love that we've been exploring through the caravans and the protests recently. So we hope that our small efforts to pressure the US government will help in that particular aspect. And it was very interesting, I thought, that the British NGO Oxfam, who is a very respected NGO here, issued a report alongside other NGOs in the United States criticizing the United States blockade. And Oxfam have done an incredibly good job of producing a full report. I think it's called The Impacts of the Blockade on Women in Cuba. And it has whole sections on the effects of the blockade on health and education and so on. And I would urge anyone viewing tonight to have a look at that report. It's available now, and I think there are links to that report in the chat box. But it does show the breadth across the world from all sectors against this cruel and illegal blockade. Now, coming back to our questions, this is a question we are asked repeatedly at every meeting about the blockade. And I remember this question over many, many years. People want to know that if the vote at the UN is so overwhelming, and again this year 184 countries against 2, that is the world saying they are against the blockade. Why is it not implemented? Why does the United States ignore that vote? Presumably they have a veto, but why in that case does it make any difference to Cuba to keep bringing the motion to the United Nations? How does that help the campaign against the blockade? Could you explain that again?
Yeah, this is a question that a lot of people are asking us, and as you rightfully mentioned in your question, the decision and resolutions adopted by the General Assembly are not legally binding. The only resolutions legally binding in the United Nations are those adopted by the Security Council. However, that does not diminish their relevance, as those decisions by the General Assembly are, let me put it that way, are the maximum expression of the consensus and the views of the international community on any given issue. The role and the authority of the General Assembly are clearly established in the Charter of the United Nations, and it is within its function to discuss, to debate, and make recommendations on subjects pertaining to the international peace and security and development. So every year, hundreds of resolutions are presented to the General Assembly for approval, which is an example of the importance that member states give to this body. Because it's the General Assembly the most universal and democratic body of the organization. All the member states are represented there on equal footing. It's the only body where the 183 member states are represented, not the Security Council, not in the ECOSOC, it's the General Assembly. So the General Assembly has all the prerogatives and the moral stature to position itself on the issue of the blockade of the US government against Cuba, as it has been doing so far in the last 29 years. So this is the voice of the international community demanding the government of the United States to put an end to this policy.
Thank you. It's an incredible motion, and it's an incredible job you all do in the United Nations, I know, to make sure everybody takes part in the vote. I know this year was particularly challenging because of the participation at the United Nations General Assembly itself. So congratulations once again to you and your team and to Cuba for this vote. But we must use this as a way to demand of the world, of all of our own governments, wherever we live, that the blockade must end, and individual governments can do more than just vote each year at the United Nations. So it's important that we push our own governments to relate to Cuba, to develop relations with Cuba, and show that there is an alternative to isolation and a blockade. Now, I'd like to move on, Anna, if I can. Oh, just before that, I've been told that we've posted the letter from the US Ambassador Yael Lempert on the chat box here tonight, and it's on the CSC website, so people can see for themselves the US response to the letter from British MPs. Moving on to another topic, obviously, we've been watching in admiration Cuba's response at home and internationally to COVID-19, all the doctors around the world, the medical missions, and also the development of your own domestic vaccine program against COVID-19. And it's been wonderful to see the success rates of Abdallah and Sobrana 1 and 2 being announced recently. And I understand that around 5 million doses of vaccines have now been given across Cuba to 1 or 1.5 million people across the island. But can you let us know how the blockade has impacted on Cuba's response to COVID, to the vaccine rollout program? And have there been any recent cases, and you mentioned one earlier, or any recent direct impacts that have been affecting the vaccine rollout in particular? Because I know people are very, very interested in this vaccine rollout.
Yes, of course, the blockade is affecting the vaccine rollout program in Cuba and the escalation in the production of the vaccine. Let me put some example of the difficulties of our pharmaceutical industry is facing right now in the production of our vaccine candidates against COVID-19. And I'm not going to talk about the difficulty that we have now to produce maybe a simple aspirin. But this is also another problem that we are facing just right now, because also we have to dedicate a lot of money to battle the COVID-19 pandemic, but also we are facing a shortage in different medicines in Cuba. So because of the blockade, we were unable to obtain a total of 32 pieces of equipment and supplies related to the production of the vaccine candidates or to the conduct of the stages necessary for the completion of the corresponding clinical trials, including equipment for example, for the purification of the vaccine candidates, accessories for the production equipment, filtration tanks and capsules, potassium chloride solution, thimerosal that is used in the vaccine, bags and reagents. So therefore, we have to resort to other providers and intermediaries, which led us to let the price of all these products and equipment to increase in a 50 or 60, 65% above the normal established price. Let me tell you one of the examples in order you can really measure the impact. The different vaccine research teams have to share the only spectrometer in the country with sufficient capacity to analyze the chemical structure of their products. So only one equipment for all the research team, because we cannot buy another one. So can you imagine how faster the production of our vaccine could happen without the blockade? And currently, an additional challenge is having enough syringes to ensure the vaccination, which is why we are very grateful for all the people out there like yourself who are donating this type of supply. To some, these acts of kindness might seem nothing, but for us, they mean the world. So all these examples that I providing to you show that how the blockade impacts in the delay in production and forces the country to redirect much needed funds from other areas of the economy towards attaining the goal. Our goal is to putting a vaccine in arms and ultimately saving the life of millions of Cubans.
Well, thank you, Anna. I mean, I watch with complete admiration, as I'm sure all of us do, the ability of Cuba and Cuban scientists in this instance to develop vaccines. I know Cuba has 3 or 4 of the vaccines recognized in the world, and is the only country in Latin America to have developed its own domestic vaccine. It is an incredible achievement, and when you do it in the context of the blockade and the difficulties that Cuba finds itself in, is another miracle of Cuba at the moment. And I know people give to these appeals. Here in the UK, we launched a COVID-19 appeal, and we were inundated with support for that appeal. We've raised over £70,000 now in the appeals, and we in the last couple of months alone, we've been asked to purchase 2 very specific blocks of supplies for Cuba in conjunction with the Ministry of Health and the pharmaceutical people in Cuba. They've asked us to provide some very specific medicines for COVID patients, and also some raw materials in the vaccine production, which they needed urgently. And we were able to source those from Germany and from Switzerland, and they are either on the ships or arriving in Cuba as we speak. And we're talking with the Cuban ministry now about some more very specific, much needed materials to help with that vaccine program. And we're very, very grateful to everybody. I know many of the people on this call tonight will have donated to that appeal, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you here tonight that has donated. Obviously, you can still donate. The money is being used for very specific items of need right now in Cuba. So thank you again to everybody. And if you do want to donate, I know that the full details of that medical appeal will be both being posted right now in the chat box. And we will update everybody as we go along. We send people updated reports on what we're using the money for, and what is being purchased at any one time. And it's been a real lesson in solidarity, in practical solidarity, to see how quickly people have responded. Anna, when will the next vote be? I know it's been a long time since the last United Nations vote, and I know you won't be in New York perhaps at the next one, but when is the next United Nations vote likely? Is it in the autumn as it's normally been in the past, or is it going to move to June permanently now, or are you not too sure? Can you tell us a bit about the future votes?
Yes, we just finished the voting. We are now consider exactly when is going to be the most appropriate time to present the next resolution, because maybe October, November this year is going to be very soon, but we haven't had any decision yet. We have to look also to the program of the General Assembly, and also all the timing to present a new report. So all of these are on the consideration, but for sure, we are going to present a resolution in the 76th session of the General Assembly. That is from September this year to September next year. But still, we are evaluating what is going to be the most appropriate time to present it, in order that all the conditions are in place for the voting.
Well, of course, we could say if there is another vote, because perhaps the blockade will be ended. You never know. We don't want to be too pessimistic, of course, and we don't look forward to the vote of the United Nations at all, because it shows another year or another 2 years of blockade of the Cuban people. But if there is another vote, if there is another need for another resolution, the next one will be the 30th such resolution from Cuba. And I wonder if, well, maybe it's too early to say if Cuba is thinking how to do something different or special if it is the 30th anniversary, because it's a terrible indictment, obviously, of that world system, that the UN has overseen 30 votes against this blockade, or 29 so far, and it's still in place.
So let me go back to something that you mentioned before. The blockade is a law. It's a law approved by the U.S. government. So in order to be lifted, it has to be for the Congress, so it has to be approved for the Congress. But the government of the United States have the power to take a lot of measures that do not need to pass through the Congress, and they can ease the impact of the U.S. blockade against the Cuban population. So we know that maybe the lifting of the blockade is a long-term goal, but to ease a lot of measures, particularly those who were implemented during Trump administration, that have been a very devastating impact in the Cuban economy and in the population. It's something that that the U.S. government, the current U.S. government can do. So next year, as you mentioned, is the 30 annual vote of the resolution. You know, Rob, I was here in '93, the second time, the second opportunity. This is my second post-it in New York. So at the time, we were counting voting 50 something. So to arrive to the overwhelming support of the General Assembly and to participate, even I was witness during my second term here, and now in my tenure here, of the only time that the resolution received 181 votes, 2 abstention, and not a single country vote against. So I have been very proud to witness that, and also for many years to see how we were increasing, and countries understand the importance of also support the claim of Cuba, because it's a just claim. So on next year, it's still too soon to know how preparation will unfold for that occasion. But indeed, it's an important, very important anniversary, and whatever actions adopted in anticipation of the vote of our resolution, we are sure that we will be able to count on the support of the international community on this issue.
Well, it's when you watch the vote, and we try to watch a lot of it, and the discussions are the most interesting part, and the contributions from across the globe, from Africa, from Asia, from countries you don't normally hear their voices, and it's wonderful to hear them standing up against the bullying tactics of the United States, because there is so much pressure, economically speaking, and from all sorts of diplomatic means, to press countries to not stand alongside Cuba. So it's a wonderful testament to the work you do and to the people of Cuba, because of course it respects the society that you have built and the people that you represent. And Cuba has a wonderful name around the world, and we're very, very proud of our association with you and with the Cuban people. So you are doing an amazing job in very, very difficult circumstances. Before we move on to the next question, I want to just make an appeal to everyone watching tonight, because we're here for a reason. It's solidarity with Cuba. And if any of you are not yet members of the Cuba Solidarity Campaign, do join. It's the best way of helping the people of Cuba. It enables us to coordinate campaigns, organise meetings such as this, work with members of parliament, with trade unions across the country, and work with the Cuban people to defend their sovereignty, their self-determination. So please, if you're not already a member, please consider joining. The links are on the chat. I'm sure they're up there by now. If you know people who you think should be members of Cuba Solidarity Campaign, sign them up too. That's an amazing way of helping, directly helping the people of Cuba. We give some amazing offers also. You get a free eco bag and some badges, and our wonderful magazine Cuba C 4 times a year. So it's a great way of helping the campaign of solidarity with the Cuban people and fighting against the blockade. You can, of course, also donate to the COVID-19 appeal, which we've mentioned before, but also to the work of Cuba Solidarity Campaign as well. It's immensely appreciated if you can. You know that normally we're a very active campaign. We're at over 30 trade union conferences, we're at street festivals and music festivals and so on around the country each year. And obviously over the last 18 months, we've been unable to do much of that work. We've worked hard to keep things going, but of course we haven't been able to reach out as well as we have done normally. So if you can help us in any way at this time, that would be wonderfully appreciated. And we, you know, we're not just looking for large donations. We will accept any donation, large or small. In fact, we love small donations from hundreds of people. So that's really, any help you can give would be great. But do join if you're not already a member. It will be very much appreciated and very worthwhile, I'm sure. Anna, talking of solidarity, we're a solidarity campaign of thousands of people, but also trade unions, members of parliament, and so on across the country. What would you say are the most important next steps following the UN vote for Cuba, but also for the international movement of solidarity, organisations like us, which I know are in every country of the world? How best can people and solidarity campaigns continue the fight against the blockade at this time?
Well, I think that information is key in this fight. So we need to get the truth about the blockade out there in order to counteract the very damaging storyline the U.S. government has to try to sell people over 6 decades. We have to provide the example that are not mere rhetoric, are the real impact in the Cuban people, in the daily life. I know that a lot have been done, and every day we are so grateful to have organizations like your organization and people around the world that support Cuba and in their fight for the lifting of the blockade, and it's stand in solidarity with us, and to take on in order to educate so many people about Cuba, its people, and why the blockade is illegal, why the blockade is cruel and should be lifted. And I think that this is the a very important way in that you can help, because you know that the information sometimes are in the hand of the mass media that do not report the reality, or sometimes the realities are well, now I forgot the word in English, tergiversar. Well, the reality are not portrayed in how it is. So we need to become the media ourselves, and to convey to your colleagues, to convey to the other organization why we are fighting in order that this policy, why this blockade have to be lifted, because the cruel impact that have in the Cuban population. We hopefully, once the pandemic is under control, I think that we will be able to plan for more together on the fight against the blockade to Cuba. But also our recognition for the work that you have been doing all over all the organizations around the world. I have been posted in another country, and I saw the union, as you mentioned, the trade union, women organizations, even particular person, individual person who try to help Cuba in our demand for to the end of this policy.
Well, thank you very much for those words, and I can assure you that we will do everything we can to bring people together from every background, every organisation across the country, so that we have a firm campaign of solidarity with Cuba to pressure the United States, but also to focus our work on the British government, because we see that when Britain has developed mutual relations with Cuba of respect and understanding, and there are a number of accords with Cuba in higher education, but also, you know, in health, in tourism and trade between our countries. It shows directly to the United States that there is an alternative way of working with Cuba. It may not be a country which Britain has everything in common, but it is a country with which we should have a respectful relationship. And 250,000 British people used to go to Cuba before COVID every year. And I can tell you that they all come back extremely impressed with Cuba and the people they've met, and so on and so forth. So millions of people from this country know Cuba, and our job is to really channel that understanding of Cuba's culture, its society, its music, its dance, which we love over here in the UK, for sure, but to channel that into a political understanding that there is a blockade. The blockade continues. It has a very serious impact on the people of Cuba, and we must do everything we can at this time to do everything we can to end it. We've had a couple of...
Can I add something that I forget, and also is part of your work? I think, you mentioned something is about maybe you can consider to reach your parliamentarians, to reach people in the executive branch of the government in order to call, to tell them about, because as I say, the blockade is not only impact Cuba, impact UK. Because if you want to have trade with us, you cannot do it because your companies are afraid of the impact of the blockade. So it's important also, do you read those who can make changes and who can talk with the US government on this issue, and in particularly respect of Title III and of the Helms-Burton Act because of the extraterritorial impact of the blockade. And in order that your government could take action to the U.S. government branch. So this is another way also that to help. And you already mentioned, but this is something that I forgot to mention.
Oh, well, thank you, Anna. I can assure you, we're very conscious of our role here in the British government and the impact. And the motion in Parliament, it was the Cuba Solidarity Campaign and its members, thousands of whom wrote to their members of Parliament to ask them to sign that motion. Most British members of Parliament, unfortunately, don't have Cuba at the top of their political agenda. So we have to encourage them to think about Cuba and the blockade. So that is the job of solidarity in this country. And we do what we can to press our own government at every level. We've had a couple of extra questions that have come in. We have a question from Johnny Mal. It's pretty much been answered, I think. He's asking about why, if 97% of countries of the world vote against the blockade, why does it continue? And you've talked about that before. We had a question from John Wickens. It's quite an interesting question. He asked, what are the 10 most important things for Cuba when the blockade has gone? So I'm very pleased to see his optimism that he's thinking beyond the blockade. But obviously 10 things is quite a lot, but perhaps you could say something. What would be Cuba's priorities, do you think? Or what would be Cuba's capacity or abilities if the blockade did end? How do you see things happening with Cuba? What would be different if the blockade ended?
Well, we have a lot of possibility. We have proven that even with the blockade, we can achieve 5 vaccine candidates. We can have a very well-developed biotechnology industry. We have a very a high-level technical forces. So we can provide to our country, our countrymen, free health, free education. So imagine all these possibilities without the blockade. We would like to see more developed in our country in order we can continue to provide to our population a living standard that they can live without any concern. And this is something that we can do it because we have been proving that with the blockade, we are achieving in the social area a lot of goals that even some developed countries do not have. We have, for example, equal payment for women and men that in the US they don't have. We provide free healthcare, free education. Even if you want to have a PhD, you don't have to pay. If you have an open heart surgery, you don't have to pay. So, but we want to also to increase the living standard of our population. That a person, we don't want to create rich people, but we want that with my salary, I can have a decent life. I can have a decent life, and I can go and enjoy life. And this is so, but also to maintain. Maybe it's difficult to understand, but that everybody is the same. We don't like that to have a society where there's those people that have a lot of money and people who don't have even to buy food. So I think that we are going to put all of our effort in order for the benefit of our population.
Well, I know it's wonderful to hear your vision, because it's a vision I know that people watching this meeting and people across the globe share, that where there's a world, we know there are enough resources for everybody. The problem is not that there is not enough in our world. The problem is it is not shared fairly across our world, and that some people and some countries are totally taking much more than they need, and that is incredibly unfair. And in a rich world like ours, to see people still starving in some parts of the world is a terrible indictment of our current system. So it really is wonderful. We all want a better world. As Jay said, a better world is possible. We all want that better world, but nobody wants a world of greed and individualism. We want everybody to have a fair life and a healthy life and an educated life. And we can see in Cuba the possibilities. And I certainly share your aspiration that or your dreams that if the blockade was no longer there, what could Cuba achieve then? Because what you have achieved so far is truly remarkable. It's a real beacon of light, and it's why we are proud to be in solidarity with Cuba. So I think we are getting towards the end of our meeting. I don't know if you wanted to say a few more words before the end, but just before I give you that opportunity, Ana, I just want to let people know that on the 26th of July, we will be celebrating alongside the Cuban embassy here in London that wonderful day, the 26th of July, the anniversary of the attack on the Moncada barracks in 1953, I think, if I'm right. And we will be hosting a gala celebration with some live music from Cuban musicians and some films and footage about July the 26th, what it means to Cuba, but also what it tells us about how to change and how to make things better in a society. So I hope many of you will sign up to that meeting. It should be that celebration. It should be an enjoyable evening on the 26th of July. So do follow us on social media and sign up to our email newsletter, Cuba Update, as well, so you're kept informed about those events. So Ana, I don't know, we have a few minutes. If there is anything you would like to say to our audience here tonight or beyond before we close the meeting tonight.
Yes, I don't want to go without expressing our deepest gratitude for your unwavering solidarity throughout the year. You have supported and defended Cuba like any Cuban. And we know that sometimes taking risks, and that is something that we highly appreciate and we cherish. And I want to say something that our national hero wrote, and for us is very important. Jose Marti said, and I quote, "One just principle from the depth of a cave is more powerful than an army." And we believe that our is a just case, and history has been a witness to it. And I can assure you and all of those who are engaged with us today, and all of those on the solidarity movement around the world, that as long as there remains a Cuban that carries within her or him that undeniable truth of our just principle, we will not give up. We will not stop demanding for the end of this cruel and illegal policy, and we will continue being the Cuba of solidarity and hospitality. We will continue sharing what we have with with all those people who need us. So this is something that for us is very important. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are sometimes a rich or not a rich country. During the pandemic, this is something that I like to say. During the pandemic, we start South-North cooperation because we had Italy and we had Andorra. Usually the cooperation comes North-South, but with the pandemic, we start the South-North cooperation. So we are a country with a long history of cooperation and solidarity. we are going to maintain this because we are very proud of that. This is something, and also we are very grateful for all the friends that we have around the world. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ana. And I know that the Ambassador Barbara Montalvo would like to pass on her thanks and gratitude to you, but she's also would like to pass on her gratitude to everybody in the call tonight, everyone on the meeting, and all the people in solidarity with Cuba. So thank you, Barbara, as well. Well, thank you once again to everybody who's joined us tonight. I know we've had some great feedback. People have very much enjoyed Ana's response from New York. It's always wonderful to hear directly from the Cubans and from Cuban government representatives like yourself, Ana. You've done a wonderful job over the past few months at the UN, and I wish you all the best when you finish this post. So thank you very much, Ana, for your time tonight, and thank you once again to everybody for joining us in this final meeting in this series of Breaking the Blockade. Thank you all, and stay safe.
See you in Cuba.
See you in Cuba. That would be wonderful. That would certainly be wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.